Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. This Saturday is UFC 274, an amazingly stacked UFC pay-per-view. And in the featured fight on the main card, we have Michael Chandler versus Tony Ferguson. And this is going to be my full breakdown and prediction for this amazing lightweight fight. And I'll also be doing a breakdown and prediction for the co-main event, Rose Namajunas versus Carla Esparza for the women's strawweight title, as well as the main event, Charles Oliveira versus Justin Gaethje for the lightweight title. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss those videos. Plus, I do UFC prediction videos every single week. So this fight, and I feel like a lot of people are excited for this fight. Stylistically, it's a very intriguing fight. But I feel like a lot of people aren't talking about the importance of this fight because both guys are coming in on losing skids. You have Michael Chandler on a 2-fight losing skid. You have Tony Ferguson on a 3-fight losing skid. And this is a must-win for both guys, particularly Tony Ferguson has lost the last 3 fights, hasn't looked particularly good in any of those 3 fights. And a lot of people are already bearing Tony Ferguson, saying, if he can't beat Michael Chandler, it's probably time for him to retire. There are people asking, will the UFC potentially cut Tony Ferguson if he loses to Michael Chandler? And then you have Chandler. If he loses to Tony Ferguson, then he's going to end up in the same spot Ferguson is in now. He will have lost 3 fights in a row if he loses to Tony Ferguson, and it's just not going to be a good position to be in for either guy. Chandler would be on a 3-fight losing streak, and Ferguson would be on a 4-fight losing streak. It's a very important fight, must-win fight for both guys. And then on top of that, also, this could be a fight that decides who fights Conor McGregor in his return. Michael Chandler, 100%. If he is able to defeat Tony Ferguson, he is calling out Conor McGregor in his post-fight interview in the cage. He's been laying the seeds for that for a while now, kind of sucking up to Conor, saying how much he respects Conor and how much he wants to fight Conor. And Tony Ferguson has called out Conor before. There was talk of Tony versus Conor back at UFC 249 when Khabib had to pull out of the fight. And I'm sure probably Tony Ferguson might call him out as well. And a lot of people want to see that fight just because of the dynamic of Tony Ferguson's weirdness with Conor McGregor and his trash talk. So the winner of this fight could definitely be the guy to welcome Conor McGregor back from his leg injury. So this is a very important fight in many ways. So if you look at the tail of the tape for this fight, you have Michael Chandler, who's currently ranked number 5 in the UFC official rankings. Tony Ferguson is ranked number 7. Chandler is 36. Ferguson is 38. Chandler is 5'8". Tony is 5'11". Chandler has a 71.5-inch reach. Ferguson has a 76-inch reach. So youth advantage for Michael Chandler, but not much. 2 years younger, and a height advantage and a reach advantage for Tony Ferguson. Now, if you look at Tony Ferguson's career as a whole, he's been in the UFC for so long. He's been in the UFC since 2011 when he won the Ultimate Fighter. And if you're one of the newer fans of the past few years, you have not seen Tony Ferguson in his prime. And I encourage you to go back and watch some of these fights. I mean, Tony Ferguson, there's a reason people were calling him the boogeyman, because he was going out there and just beating guys so badly and damaging them. And I'm sure you guys seen the pictures of Tony Ferguson's opponent after he fought them. And he's just had so many great fights and so many great performances. But right now he's on a 3-fight losing streak, and it's not a really good look. And I know a lot of people are dancing on Tony Ferguson's grave. I'm not necessarily one of those people. I'm one of the people who I understand that it's not a great look. He was dominated pretty much in his last 3 fights. But I look at who he fought. So if you look at his last 3 fights, his last fight was at UFC 262 back in May of last year. He fought Beneil Dariush, who's at the top of the division. Beneil Dariush just took him down, grappled him. That's always been Tony Ferguson's problems with grapplers, being able to be taken down and controlled on the ground, and just got dominated for pretty much all 3 rounds, ground and pound. He avoided, I think it was a knee bar submission from Beneil Dariush. Before that, UFC 256 against Charles Oliveira. He was just taken down, controlled on the ground, almost armbarred in that fight. I don't know how he didn't tap. His arm was about to be ripped off by Charles Oliveira, but he survived, lost via decision, was dominated by Charles Oliveira in that fight. That was December of 2020. Before that, he fought Justin Gaethje at UFC 249 and was TKO'd in the 5th round. And I believe this is the worst performance of them all, even though he was competitive in that 1st round. He just took so many shots from Justin Gaethje in this fight. And to see Ferguson damaged so badly in that 5th round, to kind of, do that weird motion where eventually the referee steps in because Ferguson gets hit with a big shot. He starts kind of shaking his head, and the ref just stepped in from accumulated damage because Tony Ferguson is so tough, almost to his detriment, which I will talk about later. But you look at these three guys. You have Beneil Dariush, who's on the cusp of a title shot. He was supposed to fight Islam Makhachev before his injury. It was going to be a #1 contender fight. You have Charles Oliveira, who is the current lightweight champion. Then you have Justin Gaethje, who is fighting for the lightweight title, and he won the interim title against Tony Ferguson when Khabib pulled out. And on top of that, a lot of people don't talk about that Justin Gaethje fight. They say, oh, Justin Gaethje took a Tony Ferguson fight on short notice. I know Tony Ferguson was scheduled to fight Khabib Nurmagomedov, but he also fought Justin Gaethje on short notice. He went from game planning for Khabib, who's going to take him down and wrestle him, to fighting Justin Gaethje, primarily a striker. So we have to give Tony Ferguson some leeway there. I know it was a nasty beating. I know he took a lot of damage, and I do think it was a career-altering beating. But I still have to, look at it as he's fought three of the best in the world. He's lost. He's got dominated. But again, we have to look at his opponents before we say Tony Ferguson has completely fell off a cliff. These are three great fighters, all in the title discussion still to this day. All losses have aged not so badly for Tony Ferguson. Now, you look at the wins before that. Tony Ferguson was on a crazy win streak. Absolutely destroyed Donald Cerrone back in 2019. Destroyed Anthony Pettis. That was a competitive fight, but another great fight for Tony Ferguson. Every fight Tony Ferguson is exciting. Submission win over Kevin Lee. He faced adversity in that first round, was able to come back and win the interim lightweight title against Kevin Lee, which he eventually was stripped from because he had an injury or whatever. I don't remember the exact situation. Beat Rafael Dos Anjos in a 5-round fight, and he put an absolute clinic on RDA in that fight. Great win. Lando Venata submitted him. Tony Ferguson, you look at his resume as a whole, he has 25 pro MMA wins, and he has 20 stoppages. He's only ever won by decision 5 times, which is insane. There is so many great fights from Tony Ferguson. This isn't a particularly great fight, but I wanted to mention this fight. And I know this is getting way back, which really, when you look back, 5-6 years ago, I don't really find these fights all that relevant. It's still worth noting. But I wanted to mention this fight against Danny Castillo back at UFC 177. He was taken down and controlled for all 3 rounds. And he still won the fight because he was constantly elbowing off his back and doing damage off his back. And I believe that the judges got this decision right. But if you haven't seen some of Tony Ferguson's fights from his prime of his career, do yourself a favor, go back and watch those fights. So if you look at Michael Chandler, moving over to Michael Chandler, he's a guy that has a lot of pro MMA fights as well as a lot of pro MMA wins, 22 wins. And of those 22 wins, 17 stoppages, 10 by knockout, 7 by submission. Chandler comes in on a 2-fight losing streak. His last fight was that amazing fight at UFC 268 against Justin Gaethje. Before that, another amazing fight against Charles Oliveira at UFC 262, where he was TKO'd in the second round. To this day, the best 2-round fight I've ever seen. Chandler was so close to winning the lightweight title. This was for the vacant lightweight title after Khabib retired. Chandler was so close to stopping Charles Oliveira. And somehow Oliveira survived. And, and also in that first round, Chandler survived with Oliveira on his back, which is worth noting. But somehow Oliveira survives the onslaught of first round. Michael Chandler comes back 20 seconds into the second round, clips Michael Chandler, puts him down, and finishes him via TKO. 2 crazy fights. The Justin Gaethje fight was, I want to say it was one-sided. Chandler had his moments, especially in the first round, but I think if I remember correctly, I scored all 3 rounds for Gaethje. In the third round, I know people talk about this as an amazing fight, and I do agree it was an amazing fight. Third round, both guys were a little bit tired. Chandler got hurt badly in the second round with an uppercut and was able to survive. Third round was a lot of Chandler kind of playing to the crowd and not really doing a whole lot because he was gassed out. Now, if you look at Chandler's career, and I know a lot of people might, have just, realized who Michael Chandler is just because he only has 3 fights in the UFC. And there's a lot of fans who watch MMA who only watch the UFC. I've been watching Michael Chandler in Bellator for years, and he's had some amazing fights. You go all the way back to the Eddie Alvarez fight back at Bellator 58 in 2011. Great fight. Great back-and-forth fight where he won via 4th round rear naked choke. He has the split decision loss to Eddie Alvarez in the rematch where Eddie Alvarez won and then left the company to go to the UFC. Another great fight and a close fight there. He has the 2 losses to Will Brooks back in 2014, which is crazy because Will Brooks has just kind of fallen off the planet. He was KO'd before he left Bellator back in 2019 against Patricio Pitbull, but that's not a terrible loss to have as well. And of course, his win before he left, a KO win over Benson Henderson, which I think, even though Benson Henderson's far out of his prime, it's still a solid win for Michael Chandler. And then his UFC debut, to go out there and starch Dan Hooker like he did, clips him early, finishes him on the ground. Michael Chandler has nasty power. And throughout Michael Chandler's career, if you haven't seen some of those Bellator fights, just like I said about Tony Ferguson, same thing for Michael Chandler. Go back and watch some of those fights. Both of these guys are super exciting fighters and always have stylistically fan-friendly fights. And Michael Chandler, even though he's on a 2-fight losing streak, he was in both of those fights, so where Ferguson really wasn't in any of those 3 losses. The Justin Gaethje fight, Chandler had some moments in that first round. That was a little bit more dominant for Gaethje. But the Charles Oliveira fight, Chandler was very close to being the lightweight champion, the undisputed lightweight champion. So, even though he lost that fight to Charles Oliveira, still a very competitive fight. So when I look at this fight, I am very intrigued because I really wonder what Michael Chandler's game plan will be coming in, because Michael Chandler has the wrestling ability probably to take Tony Ferguson down and control him on the ground. But I wonder for how long. I don't know if Michael Chandler can enact that game plan for 3 straight rounds where he takes Tony Ferguson down, holds him down on the ground, a little bit of ground and pound, just controls him there and wins the fight. And that's the path to victory for most guys against Tony Ferguson. And Chandler, that's kind of against his grain. You very rarely see him come out there. He uses his great wrestling just to stuff takedowns early. And he wants to go out there. He's super explosive in that first round and just throw hands and look for the KO. And he could very well KO Tony Ferguson in this first round just because he has nasty power. But Tony Ferguson has shown that he is so durable. And I just don't know if Michael Chandler will be able to KO him. But I'm super curious because can Michael Chandler just out-wrestle Tony Ferguson, control him on the ground? Now, Tony Ferguson is a guy who really just pressures you nonstop, moves forward. And Tony Ferguson is one of the very few guys in the UFC who uses his cardio as a weapon. He will just move forward nonstop, throwing volume. And maybe you're a technically better fighter than it, but eventually his stamina will surpass yours. You will get exhausted. Tony Ferguson will still be fresh, and he will just be lighting you up on the feet and then eventually clip you, and then maybe you're hurt, and then he looks for a Darce choke or a guillotine or something along those lines. Tony Ferguson is just constant pressure. And Michael Chandler is usually a guy who's moving forward as well, looking for bombs to KO you. So, I could see this fight going so many different ways. And, when I hear people talk about this fight, most people are saying that this is a mismatch, that the UFC shouldn't have made this fight, that Tony Ferguson doesn't belong in there with Michael Chandler. I completely disagree with that. I think Tony Ferguson can win this fight. I definitely think Michael Chandler can win this fight as well. But I think Tony Ferguson has a legitimate chance in this fight. But, I don't get that people are just burying Tony Ferguson just because he has 3 losses to 3 of the best in the world. Meanwhile, you look at Chandler, he has 2 losses, and I get everything, deserves context. But Chandler's on a 2-fight losing streak as well. But again, 2 of the best in the world. I will say the same thing. They have 2 of the same losses, to the same opponents, Justin Gaethje, Charles Oliveira. Same thing for Tony Ferguson. But my official prediction for this fight is I am going to go Tony Ferguson via 3rd round submission. And I just think that Michael Chandler, could he come out and brutally KO Tony Ferguson in the first round? Yes, he can. Michael Chandler is super explosive and dangerous in the first round. But I just think Tony Ferguson, especially when he comes out fresh, the head movement, the durability, the ability to take a shot, I think, even if Chandler clips him, I don't think he's going out. Oliveira was able to survive Michael Chandler's biggest shots. Justin Gaethje was able to survive Michael Chandler's biggest shots. I think Tony Ferguson and his durability and the fact that even though he's lost his last 2 fights, he didn't take a lot of damage in the last 2. I know he took a lot of damage in the Justin Gaethje fight. So I just really see maybe the first round going to Chandler. But as the fight goes on, I think it's slowly the momentum is going to creep Tony Ferguson's way. And I just think regardless of what's happening in the fight, Tony Ferguson's going to be moving forward, throwing elbows, pumping the jab, just throwing unorthodox strikes. I think Ferguson is going to be moving forward, throwing nasty volume against Michael Chandler. And Michael Chandler, I know he does have 5-round cardio, and he does have decent cardio, but Chandler tends to slow down towards the end of fights. And he's particularly explosive in the first round, but then he kind of, gets tired and takes his foot off the gas a bit. You cannot do that against a guy like Tony Ferguson. And I believe that it was a disservice for Tony Ferguson's management not to get this fight at a 5-round fight, because if this was a 5-round fight, I'd be very confident in Tony Ferguson with the 4th or 5th round stoppage. But even with a 3-round fight, I just don't think Michael Chandler is going to come out and try to wrestle Tony Ferguson nonstop. If he does, I think he can definitely win the fight via decision. Michael Chandler can just take him down, hold him down for 3 rounds, and win a decision. But I don't think he's going to do that. I think he's going to be explosive. I think he's going to look to make a statement so he can potentially claim his shot at Conor McGregor after this fight. But I don't think he's going to be able to take Tony Ferguson out in the first round. Tony Ferguson is going to absorb the damage. I think as Michael Chandler just starts to get a little bit tired, just a little bit, and Tony Ferguson is still very, very fresh because his stamina is just unlimited. And as he's marching you down, throwing all different types of shots, standing elbows, and just walking you down, Chandler backing up is going to get tired. And I think eventually Ferguson is going to hit him. I think he's going to batter him on the feet the second half of the second round and the third round in particular. I think eventually he's going to hurt Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler is going to look for a sloppy shot on the takedown. And I think Tony Ferguson is going to wrap up a 3rd round Darce choke. I think Tony Ferguson gets the win. I think he gets back on track and he earns a little bit of respect back from the MMA community. Even if Michael Chandler wins this fight, I still think that Tony Ferguson has some skills. Michael Chandler is still one of the best in the world. But at the same time, I'll have to get off that notion, oh, well, he's only lost to the 3 best in the world. I know Chandler still would be, but you can't lose 4 fights in a row and lose, if he loses this fight somehow dominantly to Michael Chandler. I'll have to jump off the Tony Ferguson train a little bit. I still love Tony Ferguson. I love both these guys. I'm not necessarily rooting for one or the other. I love both these guys. I love both their fight styles. I've been watching both guys for a very long time. And I'm just intrigued to see this fight, but it's hard not to root for Tony Ferguson when he's on a 3-fight losing skid. But at the same time, I don't base my picks off who I want to win. That is never what I do. I'm not picking Tony Ferguson because I want him to win. I am picking Tony Ferguson because I believe his stamina will lead him to victory against Michael Chandler. I think Michael Chandler has taken a lot of damage throughout the course of his career as well that nobody even mentions. He's been KO'd several times. He's been KO'd 4 times in his career. And I know that's not a crazy amount, but when you look at Tony Ferguson, he's only lost by that TKO to Justin Gaethje, which wasn't even really a KO. So I know a lot of people don't talk about that, but I think Tony Ferguson is going to be able to beat Michael Chandler, and I still think Tony Ferguson is one of the best in the world. I'm not saying that he's going to make a run at the lightweight title, but I still think Tony Ferguson can compete with the top 10 at lightweight, and a lot of people are dancing on his grave, and I think it's completely unnecessary. But I'm really looking forward to UFC 274. Comment down below, who do you think is going to win, Tony Ferguson or Michael Chandler? What do you think of my assessment of Tony Ferguson? I'm genuinely curious. Do you think I'm crazy? Do you think Tony Ferguson is completely out of his element here against Michael Chandler, and this is a massive mismatch? I'm genuinely curious. Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.